Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. Over the past few days, we've been tracking the removal of Zhang Yuxia and Liu Zhenli from China's top military leadership. Today's update isn't about the fact of the purge, that's already baked in. It's about how wide the blast radius is starting to look. Zhang Yuxia wasn't just senior. He was the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, a Politburo member, one of the very few PLA generals with real combat experience, and for years he was viewed as Xi Jinping's most trusted uniformed partner. With him gone, and Liu Zhenli, the chief of the Joint Staff, also under investigation, the Central Military Commission is effectively reduced to Xi himself and the head of the discipline apparatus. That's a massive narrowing of China's military command structure. What's becoming clearer now is the framing Beijing is choosing. State media isn't just leaning on corruption language. They're accusing these officers of undermining the CMC chairman responsibility system and harming combat effectiveness. That's not a financial allegation. That's an operational one. It suggests dissatisfaction with execution, readiness, and maybe even resistance to guidance. And the timing matters. January is when the PLA kicks off its annual training cycle and begins implementing the new 5-year plan. If there were disputes over pace, priorities, or risk tolerance, this is exactly when they would surface, and exactly when Xi would shut them down. While that internal shakeup continues, externally, the tempo hasn't slowed at all. Around Taiwan, the pattern remains steady. Taiwanese authorities reported continued PLA aircraft activity near and across the median line this week, along with planned vessels operating around the island. No dramatic spike, no surprise formations. Just the same persistent pressure. Fighters, bombers, early warning aircraft, the usual cast. If yesterday's story was normalization, today's update is confirmation that normalization is holding. This is routine pressure delivered deliberately. Taiwan, for its part, is keeping its response practical. This week's public F-16 drills, rapid refueling, rearming with live air-to-air missiles, fast turnarounds, weren't flashy for show. They were meant to demonstrate readiness under realistic conditions. President Lai Ching-te has been consistent here. Fewer set-piece performances, more combat-oriented training, quiet competence over theater. Further south, the U.S.-Philippines dynamic continues on rails. The two conducted another joint maritime activity near Scarborough Shoal, marking the 11th such drill since late 2023. The U.S. deployed a guided missile destroyer. Manila brought naval and air assets. Beijing responded with routine patrols and familiar rhetoric about outside interference. The update here isn't escalation, it's persistence. Everyone involved knows the choreography, and everyone keeps choosing to participate. Japan is worth flagging again, but for a subtler reason. Tokyo has begun urging fishermen to stay away from waters near the Senkaku Islands. For years, fishing activity there was tolerated as a way to reinforce presence. Now the priority appears to be risk management. Chinese Coast Guard vessels were present near those islands on a record number of days last year, and the concern is that one inspection or detention could spiral fast. This is a quiet shift toward restraint, not weakness, but calculation. Zooming out to the diplomatic layer, we're seeing more texture rather than new headlines. The UK Prime Minister is still in Beijing this week, the first British leader to visit in 8 years, saying openly that London won't choose between China and the US. The delegation includes senior economic officials and business leaders, and trade and investment documents are expected. What's notable now isn't the visit itself, but the contrast. This engagement is happening alongside confirmed concerns about long-running Chinese cyber intrusions into UK telecom networks used by senior government officials. Engagement and suspicion are moving in parallel, not sequentially. More broadly, middle powers continue to hedge. Countries aren't pivoting toward Beijing politically, but economically, they're trying to reduce exposure to U.S. volatility. China, meanwhile, is leaning into that opening, presenting itself as predictable, transactional, and patient. On the military side beyond East Asia, China's naval posture keeps expanding incrementally. Carrier ambitions remain on track, with plans for 6 new carriers by 2035. The newest carrier, Fujian, is already operating with electromagnetic catapults, and China's first nuclear-powered carrier is under construction. These platforms aren't about Taiwan alone. They're about sustained presence, sea control, and protecting shipping lanes well beyond the first island chain. That broader ambition shows up in smaller moves, too. Chinese intelligence and research vessels continue operating near strategic choke points, from waters near Japan to the Arabian Sea, often coinciding with U.S. naval deployments. Civilian hulls, military utility. It's a playbook we've seen before, just executed with better technology and more confidence. Economically, the external picture remains strong, while the internal one stays strained. China's trade surplus hit a record high last year, driven by exports to markets outside the U.S. At the same time, domestic demand remains weak. Deflationary pressure continues, profit margins are thin, fixed investment fell last year for the first time on record, and youth unemployment remains elevated. Beijing's response hasn't shifted much. More manufacturing, more exports, more pressure on global markets to absorb excess capacity. In that context, China's selective flexibility on technology makes sense. This week's approval of large NVIDIA AI chip purchases for major Chinese firms is about speed and capability, not a change in philosophy. Domestic chips are still mandated for most workloads. This is gap filling, not dependency. On the cyber and intelligence front, the picture continues to darken. Reporting in the UK indicates Chinese-linked actors spent years embedded in telecom infrastructure used by senior government aides, harvesting metadata and possibly communications. Separately, Chinese state-linked hacking groups are deploying increasingly sophisticated malware against government networks across Asia, expanding credential theft and persistence capabilities. None of this is loud, but all of it is cumulative. Inside China, the security framing keeps widening. This week, the Ministry of State Security warned about foreign attempts to obtain biological samples and genetic data under the guise of research cooperation. Biotechnology, genetics, population data, these are now firmly treated as national security domains. The message is inward-facing. Trust less, document more, assume scrutiny. Thanks for listening and being part of the RH community. Please take a moment to leave a 5-star review. If you want to see some changes, email us at info@restrictedhandling.com. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK.